Do you ever listen to your favorite albums by big bands recorded by amazing producers and the electric guitars sound amazing? And then you listen to your guitar tracks and it's just not even close? Now, if you said yes, you're not alone. Because in my opinion, electric guitar is one of the hardest things in recording to really master. So in this video, I'll go over some simple methods that you can use to get better results from your guitar recordings instantly. So they sound more like your favorite bands and less like the showroom of Guitar Center. So the first thing you're going to do is spend real time making sure your guitar is actually in tune. Now, one thing that new producers may not realize is how small the difference is between in tune and in tune. Like when you're playing live or jamming with your friends at band practice, you're usually close enough that it won't make a difference. But you may be surprised that a huge amount of time spent recording guitars is really just tuning in between takes. See, there are a few ways that you can make this go faster though. Like most of the time, I do recordings on a hardtail guitar, a guitar without a whammy bar, unless the part specifically calls for a whammy bar. The fixed bridge is one less moving part that can allow your strings to go out of tune. Also, a good setup with strings that are broken in but not necessarily old will make a huge difference. Also, if your nut is lubricated and your intonation and string tension are on point, you'll just have a much easier time recording in general. Now, no matter what you do, your intonation may not always be perfect all over the neck, so you may need to tune for the part that you're playing. For example, if there's a section of the song that is up here on the high frets and it just doesn't sound right, you can press the frets that you're actually using and then tune to those notes instead of the open string. Now, if you really hate tuning, you can get a guitar with an Evertune bridge. I have one that I use a lot for recording drop-tuned guitar parts. I'm not saying this is a requirement, but if you've been looking for an excuse to get a new guitar, well, there you go. Now, one more note on setups. You will also want to make sure that your guitar's electronics are in working order. If there's any buzz or hum that shouldn't be happening, or you've got crackly knobs, take care of that before you press record. Now, once your guitar is set up, it's almost time to start rolling. And the big choice that we have to make is usually deciding between miking up an amp or using a DI. Now, there are pros and cons to both, so let's go over those, and then I'll give my methods for recording either way. So tracking with a DI input offers amazing flexibility because you have infinite options. You can choose your amp tone later, and editing is much easier and cleaner since you just have dry, clean guitar audio, and then you can reamp after the fact if you want. Now, recording a live amp offers more versatility in the moment. You have the option of moving mics, combining multiple mics, including room mics, and there's just something nice about committing to your tone while you're recording it instead of giving yourself the homework of building a tone later in a plugin after the fact. So if you're going DI, you might be used to just plugging your guitar cable right into the interface. And while this isn't necessarily a bad thing, we can take a few steps to improve your signal chain right away. Now, the first is to use a buffer. To oversimplify it way too much, a buffer is just a circuit that converts your guitar signal to the right type of signal for an interface preamp. Now, some interfaces don't need a buffer, and some will be improved by using one, but either way, there is no harm in introducing one to your signal chain. The good news is you probably already have one. Lots of guitar pedals have a buffer built in, including all Boss pedals, which means that if you are recording with a Boss tuner, which you probably have, then you have a buffer. And you can tune without having to use your mouse to pull up your Amp Sims tuner. So 2 birds, 1 stone. But really, you're knocking out 3 birds with 1 stone, because the next technique for improving DI guitars instantly is to not forget your pedal board. I see so many guitarists working hard and spending money building amazing pedal boards. But then when it's time to record, they just plug right in. And I like to think of recording a DI guitar as similar to using an amp, just simulated, which may not make sense right now, but we'll talk more about that in a moment because it will make more sense after we talk about amps, which we'll do right now. So the first thing you probably want to do when recording amps is getting your guitar, your pedal, and your amp settings dialed in. But one thing you should definitely consider is the rest of the chain. Like if you're using mics, preamps, and all that jazz to record guitars, I think it's smart to get that going quickly too. The last thing you want to do is spend an hour getting your tone sounding amazing in the room, and then throw some mics up only to find out that your tone is not translating through the recording gear. So get your tone in the right ballpark and then get mic'd up and make your final adjustments through your recording headphones or your speakers. When you're setting up to record guitar, a huge factor is mic positioning. So when you record a speaker, the part of the speaker that you point the microphone at will make a huge difference in tone. As you move further from the middle of the speaker, you'll get less treble. And if you move the mic further away from the amp in general, you'll get way less bass. Now, a nice way to capture a variety of sounds from one amp is to record it with more than one mic and then blend the sounds of different mics to taste when mixing. Now, if you do this, make sure your phase is correct by ensuring that you line up the capsules to be the same distance from the speaker, or you can flip your phase until they sound good to you. Now, if your mics are positioned out of phase, your tone will sound weak and just generally kind of weird, which is something you want to avoid 99% of the time. Besides mic position, another way to switch up your tone is to try different mics. In my opinion, the secret sauce of good guitar recordings is ribbon mics. They typically eliminate a lot of harshness and spiky transients, which allows you to have really smooth and consistent recordings that aren't as spiky as you might get with a dynamic mic. And if you blend a ribbon mic with a dynamic mic, you can get a combination of the two transient responses that will feel lively, but also not too all over the place. I'm also a big fan of using condenser mics on amps, so I suggest you play around with different combinations of mics and see what works best for the tone that you're looking for. When you're using ribbon or condenser mics, you do want to make sure that you're not sending too much noise their way. So when in doubt, check the manual and see what the max SPL is on your mic, or if they mention any specific precautions that you should take when recording loud sources. So whether you're using pedals into your amp or a DI into your interface, one thing you want to be aware of is what effects you're using when. Depending on the projects, sometimes I'll record with delay or reverb going into the amp. Other times I'll record without any time-based effects and add them later. So about the pedals and DI thing. One strategy that I found helpful, like I mentioned before, is to treat the amp simulator as if it were a real amp. And what I mean by that is that I like to treat the tone selection process similarly to as if I were using a real amp. Basically, if you're going to use pedals, run them into the interface, then pick out the amp that suits the tone you're going for best. And then once you've got something good, start recording. Do your doubles, your triples, your clean parts, your leads, and then move on with your life. If you start flipping through every single pedal and every single preset under the sun, yeah, it's kind of fun, but you will also forget to do what you sat down to do, which is recording guitars. Throw your pedal board down, pull up an AC30 or a Marshall or a Twin Reverb, and just start recording. And then start mixing. And if you need to change your tone later, you can. But don't decide that you have to just because it's an option. Also, if you have a way to split your guitar signal before plugging it into your real amp, like maybe a tuner with two outputs, it never hurts to record a dry DI signal just in case you want to change your amp tone later. Now, once your tone is locked in, it's finally time to start rolling some takes. And one of the most important techniques when it comes to recording guitar takes is making sure you're getting all of the sections down before changing your tone. So for example, a typical rock song might have distorted guitars in the intro, the chorus, and the bridge, and then clean guitars in the verses and the outro. Make sure you have good takes of everything you need in the first tone before you make changes to your settings for the other section. Listen back to everything a few times before you switch your settings, or else you may have to do it all over again when you have a hard time matching your tone for a section that you need to do more takes of. You also will want to record doubles and triples of everything while you're still set up. And for that to make sense, let's talk a little about panning. So panning is just choosing which speaker a sound comes out of. If something isn't panned at all, then it plays out of both speakers the same volume. And this is your center channel. You can also hard pan things to the left or to the right channels, which makes them sound like they're coming from that direction. You can also pan somewhere in between. For example, you could send one guitar 60% to the left and another 60% to the right if you didn't want them to sound too wide. Choosing your panning is going to have a huge effect on how your guitar sounds in a finished mix. So I like to make sure and double track just about everything to make sure I have options later on. Sometimes it's awesome to have the rhythm guitar panned hard left and the lead guitar panned hard right. Sometimes having two rhythm tracks hard panned for width and then your lead right down the middle is the right vibe. Ultimately, you'll have to experiment with this on a song-to-song basis or even sometimes a part-by-part basis. But if you want to pan the same part to the left and to the right, what you don't want to do is just copy and paste the same performance into each speaker. This is effectively the same as having no panning at all, and that's in the best case. In the worst case, you could accidentally introduce phase problems. Now, this isn't really a recording technique, it's more of a mixing one, but I think it's super helpful, and that is how you can fake having double tracked guitars when you only have one take. So the first option is you can set up a reverb that is hard pan the opposite direction of your guitar, or maybe a delay, or both. So you've got your guitar on one side, and then sending that to the reverb and delay filling out the other. That is usually enough to get you somewhere good. But if you need true doubles, what you can do in a pinch is make a second guitar track out of parts that repeat in the one take you have. For example, let's say there's two choruses in your song. You could take the audio from the second chorus, drag it onto a new track, and then pull it over to your first chorus. Then you can take the audio from your first chorus guitar take, bring that down to the new track, and pull that to the second chorus. So now you've got two different takes of the chorus playing together. Now, obviously, it is best to just get what you need in the recording process, but maybe this will help you if you ever end up in a bind. Now, the final piece of advice that I will give you when it comes to recording guitars, do not rush. When it's time to start playing, just relax. Most guitar players that I work with have a tendency to get ahead of the beat, usually because they're in their own head about nailing their parts. So if that's you, just focus on finding the pocket, feeling the rhythm, instead of getting stressed about playing the part fast enough. So that's it. All my best advice on recording electric guitars. And if you're wondering about acoustics, you're in luck, because I made this video all about recording amazing acoustic guitars. Oh, and by the way, just a quick reminder that the Producer Planner is on sale now. And if you've already got yours, I would super duper appreciate if you would leave a review. It helps a lot, so I'll link to that in the description.